I woke up to the steady beeping of machines and the antiseptic smell of a hospital room. My throat felt raw, my vision blurry, and every breath required conscious effort. The heart monitor beside my bed showed an irregular rhythm that made the nurses frown with concern. Dr. Martinez stood at the foot of my bed, his expression grave as he spoke quietly into his phone. I could barely make out his words through the fog of medication, but I heard him say my name, then the word critical, then something that made my blood run cold. He was calling my emergency contacts, telling them I might not survive the night. When my mother answered, her response shattered whatever hope I had left for my family's love. The fluorescent lights above my bed hummed softly as consciousness slowly returned to me. 3 days had passed since the ambulance rushed me here, though time felt meaningless in this sterile white room. Nurse Jenny, a kind woman with silver-streaked hair, checked my IV line while explaining what had happened during my unconscious state. "Your blood pressure dropped dangerously low," she said gently, adjusting the pillow behind my head. "Dr. Martinez had to call your family multiple times. We always contact emergency contacts when patients arrive in such critical condition." The memory came flooding back like a tide of nausea. I had been at my office holiday party, enjoying what I thought was a safe shrimp cocktail. Within minutes, my throat had begun closing, my skin erupting in angry red welts. Anaphylactic shock, they called it. My coworker Sarah had found me collapsed in the bathroom, unable to breathe, my lips turning blue. "What did my parents say when you called?" I whispered, though part of me already knew the answer would hurt. Jenny hesitated, her weathered hands pausing as she recorded my vitals on a clipboard. "Dr. Martinez spoke with your mother personally. He explained the severity of your condition, that you might not make it through the night. She said they couldn't come because your sister Madison was taking her dog for a walk, and it was important bonding time they had promised her." The words hit me like physical blows. Even when facing the possibility of losing me forever, my parents had prioritized Madison's routine with her poodle. I closed my eyes, remembering the pattern that had defined my 28 years of life. When I graduated summa cum laude from college, my parents missed the ceremony because Madison needed them to drive her to a dog training class. When I received a promotion to senior graphic designer, they skipped my celebration dinner because Precious had a veterinarian appointment for her monthly nail trimming. Madison had adopted Precious 6 months ago, a cream-colored standard poodle that cost more than most people's cars. Since then, every family conversation revolved around the dog's needs, preferences, and expensive requirements. Madison treated Precious like a furry princess, complete with designer outfits and gourmet meals prepared by a pet nutritionist, Dr. Martinez entered my room, his kind eyes filled with the practiced compassion of someone who had delivered difficult news countless times. He was a tall man, with gentle hands and a reassuring presence that made patients feel safe during their most vulnerable moments. "How are you feeling today, Dora?" he asked, checking the chart at the foot of my bed. "Physically better than emotionally?" I admitted. "Can you tell me exactly how close I came to dying?" His expression grew serious. "Your anaphylactic reaction was severe. Without immediate intervention, you would not have survived another hour. We had to use multiple doses of epinephrine and maintain you on life support for 48 hours. I have never seen a case quite so critical where the patient recovered so completely." The weight of his words settled over me like a heavy blanket. I had been alone during the most terrifying experience of my life, fighting for every breath while my parents prioritized a dog's evening walk. Unable to bear the silence from my family any longer, I reached for my phone and dialed their number. My mother answered on the 4th ring, her voice carrying the irritated tone she reserved for inconvenient interruptions. "Dora, thank goodness you called. Madison has been so worried about how your hospital situation might affect Precious. The poor darling has been refusing her organic salmon treats ever since she sensed the family stress." "Mom, I almost died," I said quietly. "Well, obviously you are fine now, or you wouldn't be calling." Your father and I have been incredibly busy helping Madison prepare for Precious's upcoming dog show. Do you have any idea how much work goes into training a standard poodle for competition? The conversation continued for 10 more minutes, with my mother detailing Precious's dietary requirements, grooming schedule, and behavioral training progress. Not once did she ask about my medical treatment, my pain level, or when I might be released from the hospital. When I finally hung up, Jenny returned with my afternoon medications. She had obviously overheard the conversation, and her expression held a mixture of sympathy and barely controlled anger. Some families don't know how to handle medical crises, she said diplomatically, or they simply don't care enough to try, I replied. That evening, Ashley, my best friend since high school, arrived with flowers and a container of homemade soup. She had been traveling for work when the emergency happened, but she rushed to the hospital as soon as she returned to town. Ashley was the sister I had always wished for, someone who showed up when it mattered and celebrated my successes without jealousy. I cannot believe they chose dog walking over your life, she said, settling into the uncomfortable visitor's chair. When I heard what happened, I tried calling your parents myself. Your mother actually laughed and said you always land on your feet, like some sort of cat. The revelation cut deeper than I expected. My mother had dismissed my near-death experience as if it were a minor inconvenience, something I would handle independently as usual. As Ashley and I talked through the evening, a terrible clarity began emerging. My parents had never seen me as their daughter who deserved love and attention. I was their reliable problem solver, their financial backup plan, their responsible child who required no emotional investment because I had learned to take care of myself. But the most shocking twist came when Ashley mentioned something she had learned from mutual friends. Madison had known about my hospitalization within hours of my arrival. She had convinced our parents that I was probably exaggerating the severity of my condition for attention, as she claimed I had always done. My own sister had actively prevented our parents from visiting me during the most critical hours of my recovery. The machines around my bed beeped steadily as this information sank in. I had not just been forgotten, I had been deliberately dismissed by the very people who should have protected me. On the 4th day of my hospital stay, my parents finally appeared in my doorway, accompanied by Madison and a perfectly groomed Precious on a rhinestone-studded leash. My mother carried a small bouquet of grocery store flowers that looked like an afterthought, while my father checked his phone repeatedly, clearly anxious to leave. There she is, our little survivor, my mother announced, with forced cheerfulness. We brought Madison and Precious because we thought seeing them would cheer you up. Madison barely glanced at me before focusing entirely on arranging Precious's travel bed in the corner of my hospital room. The dog, a magnificent creature with pristine white curls, looked more pampered than most human patients I had seen during my stay. Precious has been having digestive issues ever since she heard about your drama, Madison said, stroking the dog's silky ears. Doctor, Whitmore thinks stress affects her more than most dogs because she has such a sensitive personality. I stared at my sister in disbelief. She was 25 years old, with a kind of effortless beauty that had always made heads turn. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves, and she wore a designer outfit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. But her words revealed a callousness that shocked me, even though I should have expected it. Madison, I was unconscious for 2 days with anaphylactic shock. The doctor said I almost died, I said carefully. But you didn't die, so everything worked out fine, she replied, feeding Precious an organic treat from a gold-plated container. Doctor, Whitmore says that animals can sense when their humans are dealing with family crisis, and it affects their emotional well-being. My mother settled into the visitor's chair and immediately launched into an excited monologue about Madison's upcoming wedding plans. The ceremony was scheduled for spring, and apparently every detail required extensive discussion and financial planning. We have been looking at venues, and Madison found the perfect location. My mother gushed. It's a historic mansion with gardens that will be absolutely stunning for photographs. The only challenge is the cost. But family helps family. right?" My father looked up from his phone long enough to nod enthusiastically. "The venue fee alone is $15,000, not including catering, flowers, or the photographer. But Madison deserves a fairy tale wedding." As they spoke, I learned that Precious would serve as the ring bearer, complete with a custom-designed harness covered in Swarovski crystals. The dog's wedding outfit cost $800, more than many people spend on their entire wardrobe. "Speaking of expenses," my mother continued, her tone becoming more serious, "we need to discuss your contribution to the wedding. We were thinking $8,000 would be appropriate, given your stable job and the fact that you don't have many expenses living alone." The casual assumption that I would fund Madison's wedding left me speechless. My parents had never asked about my financial situation, my goals, or my own dreams. They simply expected me to open my wallet whenever Madison wanted something. $8,000 is a significant amount of money," I said slowly. "It'll need time to consider it." Madison's face immediately crumpled into the pouty expression she had perfected as a child. "Dora, this is my wedding we're talking about. I thought you would be excited to help make my special day perfect." "We have already told Madison she can count on her sister's support," my father added firmly. "Family obligations don't require lengthy consideration." As if the financial demand wasn't enough, my mother casually mentioned that they had promised Madison my childhood bedroom for conversion into a luxury suite for Precious. My old room, with its built-in bookshelves and window seat where I had spent countless hours reading and dreaming, would become a climate-controlled paradise for a poodle. "Precious needs more space for all her belongings," Madison explained. "Her current room in our house is too small for her bed, toy collection, and grooming station. Your old room has that lovely morning light she prefers." When I expressed concern about losing my childhood space, Madison burst into tears, claiming I had always been jealous of her happiness and success. Within seconds, my parents rallied to comfort her, telling me to stop being selfish during Madison's special time. "Madison has been under tremendous pressure planning this wedding," my mother said, stroking my sister's perfect hair. "The least you can do is support her instead of creating additional stress." I watched this familiar scene play out, remembering countless similar moments throughout our lives. Whenever I expressed needs or preferences that conflicted with Madison's desires, I became the selfish one, the jealous sister, the family problem that needed correction. The visit continued for another hour, with my parents and Madison discussing wedding details, Precious's dietary requirements, and their plans for the upcoming holidays. Not once did anyone ask about my recovery, my treatment plan, or when I might be discharged from the hospital. As they prepared to leave, my mother mentioned that they had already contacted several vendors and put deposits down for Madison's wedding, counting on my $8,000 contribution to cover the remaining costs. "We knew you would want to be generous with your sister," she said, kissing my forehead with the brief affection usually reserved for distant relatives. "Madison is so fortunate to have a responsible sister who understands family priorities." After they left, I lay in my hospital bed staring at the ceiling, processing what had just happened. My family had visited not to check on my health or offer emotional support, but to ensure I would fulfill my financial obligations to Madison's fairy tale wedding. Later that evening, as I waited for sleep that wouldn't come, I overheard my parents talking in the hallway outside my room. They thought I was asleep, but their voices carried clearly through the thin hospital walls. "Do you think 8,000 is enough?" my father asked. "We should ask for 10,000, my mother replied. Dora always feels guilty when she thinks she's causing family problems. Her little hospital scare probably made her realize how much she needs us. Madison mentioned that Dora seemed resistant to giving up her old bedroom. My father said, "We might need to apply more pressure about family loyalty." "Don't worry," my mother responded. "Dora has always been desperate for our approval. She'll give us whatever we ask for, rather than risk disappointing us." Their words hit me like ice water, revealing the calculated manipulation behind their entire visit. They weren't concerned about my well-being. They were strategizing how to exploit my near-death experience for maximum financial gain. As I listened to their retreating footsteps, a new understanding crystallized in my mind. I wasn't their beloved daughter who had narrowly escaped tragedy. I was their reliable ATM, their responsible child who existed to solve problems and provide funding for Madison's expensive lifestyle. Alone in my sterile hospital room, surrounded by the gentle hum of medical equipment, I began examining my life with brutal honesty for the first time in 28 years. The conversation I had overheard in the hallway replayed in my mind like a recording, each word confirming suspicions I had buried under years of desperate hope for parental love. My childhood had been a masterclass in conditional affection. While Madison received praise for simply existing, I earned approval only through achievement and sacrifice. I graduated high school as valedictorian, worked 3 jobs through college to avoid burdening the family with student loans, and landed a prestigious position at a respected design firm. Yet, none of these accomplishments ever seemed to matter to my parents. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, curious about the financial impact of my family relationships. The numbers told a devastating story. Over the past 5 years, I had contributed $43,700 to various family needs: Madison's car repairs, my parents' vacation to Europe, emergency home improvements that somehow always coincided with Madison's expensive requests. During that same period, my parents had given me exactly nothing. No birthday gifts beyond generic cards, no Christmas presents, no celebration dinners for my professional achievements. When I mentioned feeling hurt by their lack of recognition, they reminded me that I was financially stable and didn't need their help like Madison did. The pattern extended beyond money into every aspect of our relationships. My parents attended every event in Madison's life, from her college sorority meetings to her amateur theater performances. They had missed my college graduation, my work presentations, and every birthday dinner I had hosted. Their excuse was always the same. Madison needed them more because she was sensitive and required emotional support. Ashley returned the next morning with coffee and fresh pastries from our favorite bakery downtown. She took one look at my expression and settled into the visitor's chair with the practiced patience of someone prepared for a difficult conversation. "You look like you've been awake all night, thinking," she observed. "I overheard my parents in the hallway last night," I said, then repeated their conversation verbatim. Ashley's face grew progressively more horrified as I spoke. "They're treating you like a business transaction," she said when I finished. "You realize this isn't normal family dynamics, right? Most parents would have been here within hours when their daughter nearly died." "I called you when I heard about the hospital situation," Ashley continued. "Your mother told me that you always land on your feet, so they weren't worried. She said they were dealing with a real crisis because Precious had been anxious lately." The revelation stung, but it also illuminated something important. While my parents minimized my medical emergency, Ashley had immediately rearranged her work schedule and driven 4 hours to be here. She showed more concern for my well-being than my own family. Dr. Martinez stopped by during his afternoon rounds, and his expression grew thoughtful when he saw Ashley and me deep in conversation. "How is your family handling your recovery?" he asked diplomatically. "They're more concerned about my ability to contribute to my sister's wedding than my actual health," I replied honestly. His professional composure slipped slightly, revealing genuine concern. In 30 years of practice, I have rarely seen a case where family members didn't immediately respond to news of anaphylactic shock. "Your situation was serious enough that we contacted social services to ensure you had adequate support systems." The fact that hospital social workers had been involved due to my family's absence was both embarrassing and enlightening. Medical professionals who dealt with emergencies daily had found my parents' behavior unusual enough to warrant intervention. That afternoon, I made several important discoveries. My apartment lease was solely in my name, with no financial ties to my family. My savings account, built through years of careful budgeting and sacrifice, contained enough money to completely change my life trajectory. Most importantly, my professional reputation and skills were entirely my own achievements, unconnected to any family influence. For the first time in decades, I allowed myself to imagine a life without constant family drama, financial demands, and emotional manipulation. What would it feel like to wake up without dreading phone calls asking for money? How would it feel to celebrate achievements without worrying whether my success made Madison feel inadequate? The more I considered these questions, the more clearly I saw the toxic dynamics that had shaped my entire adult life. I had been supporting my family's lifestyle while they gave me nothing but criticism and neglect. They had trained me to believe that my value depended on my usefulness to them, that love was something I had to earn through sacrifice and service. Ashley watched me process these realizations with the protective anger of a true friend. She had witnessed years of my family's treatment and had often questioned their behavior, though I had always made excuses for them. "You know what the saddest part is?" I said as evening approached. "I have been so desperate for their approval that I convinced myself their treatment was normal. I thought if I just gave more, achieved more, sacrificed more, they would eventually see me as worthy of their love. But love shouldn't require payment plans," Ashley replied firmly. "Real families celebrate each other's successes and show up during emergencies. They don't treat their children like personal banks." As night fell over the hospital, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I was going to disappear from my family's life completely, leaving them to face their financial and emotional problems without me as their reliable solution. The plan began forming in my mind with surprising clarity. I would let them believe I was considering their wedding contribution, while secretly arranging my complete departure. They would learn what life looked like without their dependable daughter, only after it was too late to manipulate me into staying. For the first time since arriving at the hospital, I felt something other than pain and disappointment. I felt powerful. I felt free. And I felt ready to build a life where my worth wasn't measured by my willingness to sacrifice everything for people who saw me as nothing more than a convenient resource. The morning of my hospital discharge, I began executing the most important project of my adult life, my complete disappearance from my family's world. Dr. Martinez released me with strict instructions about monitoring for delayed allergic reactions, but my focus was entirely on the logistics of vanishing without a trace. My first stop was the bank, where I closed the joint savings account my parents had insisted on maintaining for family emergencies. The account contained $12,000, money I had contributed over the years for situations that somehow always benefited Madison. I transferred everything to my personal checking account, along with the contents of 2 other accounts my parents could access. Next, I visited my apartment complex office and gave 60 days' notice, citing a job relocation. Mrs. Henderson, the property manager, expressed sympathy for my sudden departure and helped me understand the lease termination process. The apartment that had been my sanctuary for 3 years would soon be just another address in my past. That afternoon, I called Bradley Communications, a Portland-based marketing firm that had contacted me months earlier about a remote graphic design position. The job had seemed interesting but impractical when I thought I needed to stay close to my family. Now it represented the perfect opportunity for a fresh start. "We're still very interested in having you join our team," said Jennifer Walsh, the creative director. "The position offers full benefits, competitive salary, and complete location flexibility. When would you be available to start?" "I could begin in 2 weeks," I replied, my heart racing with excitement and terror. "Excellent. I'll send over the paperwork today. Welcome to Bradley Communications, Dora." While I handled the professional arrangements, my family continued their relentless campaign for wedding contributions. Madison called every morning with updates on increasingly expensive additions to her wedding plans. The venue required upgraded lighting packages, the caterer suggested premium menu options, and Precious needed a professional groomer to prepare for her ring-bearing duties. "I found the most incredible wedding dress," Madison gushed during one of her daily calls. It's a custom Vera Wang creation that will be absolutely perfect for the photographs. The only issue is the cost. But you know how important this day is to me. How much does the dress cost? I asked, though I suspected I already knew where this conversation was heading. $18,000, but it includes alterations and a matching veil. Since you're contributing $8,000 to the wedding, I was hoping you might consider helping with the dress, too. It would mean everything to me. The casual assumption that I would fund her $18,000 dress left me momentarily speechless. Madison spoke as if my money was already hers, as if my bank account existed solely to finance her fairy tale lifestyle. That's a significant investment, Madison. I need time to think about it. But the dress designer requires a deposit this week, she pressed. I already told her my sister would handle the payment. You wouldn't want me to lose this opportunity, would you? After ending the call, I sat in my apartment surrounded by boxes and packing supplies, marveling at my family's complete obliviousness to my emotional state. None of them had asked about my recovery, my return to work, or my feelings about nearly dying alone. Their entire focus remained on extracting maximum financial benefit from my sense of family obligation. Ashley helped me research apartments in Portland, and we found a beautiful one-bedroom unit in the Pearl District with floor-to-ceiling windows and views of the Cascade Mountains. The rent was reasonable, the neighborhood vibrant, and the location perfect for someone starting a new life far from toxic family dynamics. I can't believe you're actually doing this, Ashley said as we scheduled a virtual apartment tour. After years of watching them treat you like their personal ATM, you're finally putting yourself first. It feels surreal, I admitted. Part of me keeps expecting them to somehow sense what I'm planning and try to stop me. But my family's self-absorption worked in my favor. They were so focused on wedding planning and Precious's care that they never questioned my sudden interest in their financial needs or my willingness to discuss Madison's expensive requests. My parents scheduled a family meeting for the following Sunday, claiming they needed to finalize wedding contributions and discuss household arrangements. My mother left a voicemail, explaining that they had calculated the total amount I should contribute based on my income and their assessment of my financial obligations. We think $12,000 is a reasonable contribution, she said in her message. $8,000 for general wedding expenses and $4,000 for Madison's dress alterations. We've already committed to these amounts with various vendors, so we're counting on your support. The voicemail continued, with details about converting my childhood bedroom into Precious's luxury suite, complete with custom furniture and a small refrigerator for the dog's special dietary requirements. They had hired contractors to begin renovations the following week, confident that I would enthusiastically support the project. As I listened to my mother casually discuss spending my money and erasing my childhood space, any remaining guilt about my departure plans evaporated completely. They had already written me out of their family story, reducing me to a convenient funding source for Madison's wishes. On Saturday night, I loaded my car with essential belongings and drove toward my new life in Oregon. The 8-hour journey gave me time to process the magnitude of what I was doing. I was leaving behind 28 years of family history, professional connections, and familiar routines. But I was also leaving behind decades of emotional manipulation, financial exploitation, and the crushing weight of unreciprocated love. The letter I left on my apartment's kitchen counter was carefully crafted to explain my decision while revealing truths my family had never been forced to confront. I knew they would come looking for me when I failed to appear for their family meeting, and I wanted them to understand exactly why their reliable daughter had vanished forever. As Portland's city lights appeared in the distance, I felt a combination of grief and liberation that took my breath away. I was mourning the family I had always hoped to have, while celebrating the freedom to build relationships based on mutual respect and genuine affection. The mountain peaks surrounding the city looked like sentinels guarding my future, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt truly excited about what tomorrow might bring. The letter waited on my kitchen counter like a time bomb, designed to detonate the comfortable illusions my family had built around their treatment of me. I had spent hours crafting each paragraph, ensuring that every word would be impossible to misinterpret or dismiss. By the time you read this, I will be starting a new life where I matter. The letter began. You are probably here because I missed our family meeting, the one where you planned to pressure me into funding Madison's increasingly expensive wedding demands. Let me save you the trouble of manipulating my guilt. I am never contributing another dollar to this family. The letter continued with devastating precision, detailing every financial contribution I had made over the past 5 years. $43,700 in total, itemized by date and purpose. Madison's, car payments, family vacation expenses, home improvements that somehow always coincided with my sister's requests, and countless emergency situations that never seemed to affect anyone but me. In return for my financial support, you have given me exactly nothing, the letter stated. No birthday celebrations, no recognition of my achievements, no presence during my medical emergency. When I nearly died from anaphylactic shock, you chose Precious's walking schedule over my life. That decision revealed your true priorities more clearly than any conversation ever could. But the most damaging revelation came in the 3rd paragraph, where I disclosed the recordings I had made during their hospital visit and the hallway conversation afterward. Thanks to my phone's voice memo app, I had captured their discussion about manipulating my guilt and their casual dismissal of my near-death experience. I have recordings of your visit to my hospital room, including your conversation in the hallway where you strategized about exploiting my medical emergency for maximum financial gain. You discussed how much money to demand from me while I recovered from a condition that could have killed me. I have also recorded Madison's explanation of how she convinced you I was probably exaggerating my condition for attention. The letter included printed transcripts of these conversations, making it impossible for them to deny or reframe their words. Seeing their callous statements in black and white would force them to confront the reality of their behavior toward me. These recordings, along with this letter, have been sent to Aunt Carol, Uncle Robert, Grandma Sullivan, Grandpa Martinez, and several family friends who have always believed you were proud of my achievements. The letter continued. They now understand why your successful daughter has disappeared from your lives. I had spent considerable time crafting the section about my new life, wanting them to understand that my departure wasn't motivated by temporary anger, but by a fundamental realization about our relationship dynamics. I am engaged to Marcus Rodriguez, a wonderful man I have been quietly dating for 8 months. You never met him because you never showed enough interest in my life to ask about my relationships. Marcus treats me with the love and respect I deserve, something I never received from my own family. We are building a life together based on mutual support and genuine affection. The financial breakdown was particularly detailed, showing them exactly how much their treatment had cost me over the years. I had calculated not just direct contributions, but also opportunities I had missed because of their constant demands. The promotion I had declined because it required relocation during Madison's college graduation. The advanced degree program I couldn't afford because I was funding their family emergencies. While I supported your lifestyle, I sacrificed my own dreams and goals. The letter explained. I now realize that you never wanted a daughter. You wanted a reliable source of funding for Madison's expensive preferences. That arrangement ends today. The letter's final section addressed their attempts to contact me, making it clear that my departure was permanent and non-negotiable. Do not attempt to find me or contact me through mutual friends. I have legally changed my name and moved to a different state. The phone numbers you have been calling are disconnected. The daughter you took for granted no longer exists. You will need to finance Madison's fairy tale wedding and Precious's luxury lifestyle without my involuntary contributions. I concluded with a paragraph designed to leave them with the weight of their choices. You taught me that love in our family was conditional on usefulness. I was valuable only when I could solve problems or provide money. Now you will learn what life looks like without your reliable problem solver. I hope Madison's wedding is everything she dreamed of, because she will be paying for it herself. When my parents arrived at my empty apartment that Sunday afternoon, expecting to pressure me into funding Madison's latest demands. They found only the letter and the echoing silence of a space already being reclaimed by the property management company. According to Ashley, who heard about the aftermath through mutual friends, the reaction was immediate and devastating. My mother called Aunt Carol within minutes of reading the letter, desperately trying to control the narrative before the rest of the family could process what they had learned about our family dynamics. But Aunt Carol had already received her copy of the letter, along with the recorded conversations. The woman who had always praised my parents for raising such a responsible, successful daughter was horrified to learn how they had actually treated me. "I cannot believe you chose a dog's walk over Doris' life," Aunt Carol reportedly told my mother. "And then you had the audacity to visit her in the hospital, only to demand money for Madison's wedding. What kind of parents are you?" Uncle Robert, who had been providing financial support to my parents for their retirement planning, immediately suspended all assistance pending a full explanation of their behavior toward me. The recordings of their manipulative hospital conversation had particularly disgusted him, since he had always believed I was the family's pride and joy. My grandparents, both sets, called emergency family meetings to address what they had learned. Grandma Sullivan, who had helped pay for Madison's college education, was reportedly furious about the favoritism and financial exploitation I had endured. She had always wondered why I seemed distant during family gatherings, never realizing that my parents treated me like hired help rather than their daughter. Madison's reaction was perhaps the most telling. Instead of expressing concern about my well-being or remorse about the family's treatment of me, she immediately panicked about the financial implications of my departure. Her fairy tale wedding suddenly seemed impossible without my involuntary funding, and she blamed everyone but herself for the crisis. The wedding venue, which my parents had booked assuming I would provide $8,000, sent cancellation notices when the first payment deadline passed. The dress designer, expecting a deposit for Madison's $18,000 gown, threatened to offer the custom creation to other clients. Precious's planned luxury bedroom renovation was indefinitely postponed when my parents realized they couldn't afford the contractor fees. But perhaps the most devastating consequence was the social fallout. Extended family members who had always admired my parents' successful daughters were horrified to learn the truth about our family dynamics. Friends who had envied Madison's charmed life began questioning the source of her expensive lifestyle. The carefully constructed image of our perfect family crumbled under the weight of documented evidence about their true character. As news of my disappearance and the letter's contents spread through our social circle, my parents faced something they had never experienced: accountability for their treatment of me. Without my reliable presence to solve problems and provide funding, they were forced to confront the reality of their choices and their relationship with their remaining daughter. The collapse of Madison's wedding plans became a public spectacle that my parents were powerless to control. Within 2 weeks of discovering my letter, they received cancellation notices from every vendor they had booked, using promises of my financial contribution. The historic mansion venue, which required a $15,000 deposit, terminated their contract and kept the initial payment when my parents couldn't produce the remaining balance. Madison's $18,000 Vera Wang dress became the stuff of local legend when the designer's assistant called repeatedly about the missing deposit. During one particularly heated conversation, Madison screamed at the assistant that her sister had ruined her life by disappearing, not seeming to understand that expecting someone else to fund your luxury purchases wasn't a sustainable wedding strategy. The social humiliation extended far beyond canceled vendors. Madison had spent months bragging to friends and coworkers about her elaborate wedding plans, describing every expensive detail as if the funding was guaranteed. When she had to admit that her sister would not be paying for her fairy tale celebration, the questions became increasingly uncomfortable. "I thought your sister was successful," her friend Jennifer said during a particularly awkward coffee date. "Why would she promise to pay for everything and then disappear?" Madison's inability to explain the situation without revealing her family's financial dependence on me led to increasingly desperate lies. She claimed I had suffered a breakdown, developed a gambling addiction, and finally, that I had been manipulated by my mysterious boyfriend into abandoning my family responsibilities. But the lies became harder to maintain when extended family members began sharing what they had learned from my letter and the accompanying recordings. Aunt Carol, who had always been the family gossip hub, was particularly vocal about her disgust with my parents' behavior. Dora nearly died alone in a hospital while they chose a dog's walk over their daughter's life. She told anyone who would listen. Then they visited her only to demand money for Madison's wedding. I have never been so ashamed of my own relatives. Uncle Robert's financial support, which my parents had counted on for their comfortable retirement, evaporated completely when he learned about their treatment of me. The monthly checks that had supplemented their income stopped arriving, leaving them scrambling to cover basic expenses they had grown accustomed to having handled by family money. Precious, the poodle whose care had been prioritized over my medical emergency, developed stress-related digestive problems that required expensive veterinary treatment. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The dog, whose walking schedule had been more important than my life now, needed costly medical intervention that my parents couldn't afford without my financial support. Madison's breakdown at her friend's engagement party became the talk of their social circle. When asked about her own wedding plans, she burst into tears and launched into a rambling explanation about how her selfish sister had abandoned the family during their time of greatest need. The spectacle was so uncomfortable that several people left early, and Madison found herself excluded from subsequent social gatherings. Meanwhile, my parents hired a private investigator to locate me, spending $3,000 they couldn't afford on a futile search. The investigator quickly discovered that I had legally changed my name to Dora Marcus and moved out of state, but my new address and contact information were protected by privacy laws and careful planning. Ashley, who remained my only connection to my former life, received constant calls and messages from my desperate family members. She handled their inquiries with the protective loyalty of a true friend, consistently stating that she had no knowledge of my whereabouts or contact information. "They seem to think I should convince you to come back and fix their financial problems," Ashley reported during one of our weekly phone calls. "Your mother actually said she was sure you would want to help once you realized how much stress your departure was causing Madison." The family's financial situation deteriorated rapidly without my regular contributions. Madison, who had never held a steady job due to her parents' indulgence, was forced to accept a retail position at a local department store. The salary was a fraction of what I had been providing, and the work was beneath what she considered appropriate for someone of her refined sensibilities. My parents, meanwhile, faced the reality of supporting Madison and Precious on their fixed retirement income. The expensive organic dog food, monthly grooming appointments, and veterinary care that had seemed manageable when I was contributing thousands annually became impossible luxuries. But perhaps the most devastating consequence was the social isolation that followed the revelations about their family dynamics. Friends who had admired their successful daughters began questioning what they had really known about our family. Invitations to social gatherings stopped arriving, and conversations at church and community events became noticeably strained. The final blow came 6 months after my departure, when my parents discovered through social media that I had not only survived but thrived in my new life. A Portland business magazine featured me in an article about successful young entrepreneurs, highlighting my growing graphic design company and recent marriage to Marcus. The photographs showed me glowing with happiness, standing beside a handsome man in front of a beautiful house with mountain views. My success was evident not just in my professional achievements, but in the genuine joy radiating from my face, something my parents realized they had never seen during my years of sacrificing for their comfort. "She looks different," my mother reportedly told Aunt Carol after seeing the magazine article. "I don't remember her ever looking that happy when she lived here." The comment revealed the depth of their self-deception. They had convinced themselves that I was naturally serious and responsible, never recognizing that my somber demeanor had been the result of constantly managing their emotional and financial crises. Seeing me genuinely happy and successful without them forced them to confront the possibility that their treatment had been the source of my previous unhappiness. As my first year of freedom progressed, my family's desperate attempts to re-establish contact grew increasingly pathetic. They sent letters to my former employer, contacted old mutual friends, and even showed up at places they thought I might visit. But I had anticipated their desperation and built a new life that was completely separate from anything they could access. The daughter who had sacrificed everything for their approval was gone, replaced by a confident, successful woman who had learned that love shouldn't require payment plans or self-destruction. While they struggled with the consequences of their choices, I was discovering what family relationships looked like when they were based on mutual respect and genuine affection. 2 years passed, like pages in a beautiful book I had never imagined I deserved to read. My graphic design agency, Mountain View Creative, grew from a one-person operation to a thriving business with 12 talented employees. We specialized in branding for small businesses, and our work had earned recognition throughout the Pacific Northwest. The company's success felt particularly sweet because every achievement belonged entirely to me, unencumbered by family demands or guilt about outdoing Madison. Marcus and I had married in a simple ceremony at Powell Butte, overlooking Mount Hood, surrounded by friends who celebrated our happiness without ulterior motives. His family welcomed me with the warmth I had always craved, treating me as their cherished daughter from our first meeting. His mother, Elena, taught me her grandmother's recipes and insisted on celebrating every one of my professional milestones with elaborate dinners and heartfelt toasts. Our house in the foothills had floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the Cascade Mountains, and every morning I woke to views that reminded me how far I had traveled from my previous life. The guest bedroom was decorated with my actual achievements: framed certificates, awards from design competitions, and photographs from business conferences where I had been invited to speak about entrepreneurship. The life I had built felt like emerging from a dark tunnel into brilliant sunlight. Without the constant drain of family financial demands and emotional manipulation, I had energy to pursue dreams I had never allowed myself to imagine. I enrolled in evening classes to earn my MBA, joined professional organizations, and developed friendships based on shared interests rather than family obligation. Ashley visited frequently, marveling at the transformation in my personality and confidence. "You laugh more in a single weekend here than you did in entire months back home," she observed during one of her trips. "It's like watching someone come alive." But the peaceful existence I had built was interrupted by a phone call that tested every boundary I had established. Ashley's voice was urgent when she called on a Tuesday evening in spring. "Dora, I'm so sorry to disrupt your life, but I think you need to know. Your father had a heart attack yesterday. He's stable now, but your mother is calling everyone, begging them to contact you. She's desperate." The news hit me like a physical blow, bringing back memories of the small girl who had once adored her daddy and believed he would always protect her. But I had learned the difference between love and manipulation, between genuine family crisis and emotional blackmail designed to restore old patterns. "How serious was it?" I asked, settling into the chair by our living room window where Mount Hood dominated the view. "Serious enough that he's still in intensive care, but the doctors expect full recovery." Ashley hesitated before continuing. "Your mother left me a voicemail saying the family needs you now, that this changes everything." I took a week to consider my response, discussing the situation with Marcus and Elena, whose perspective as functional family members helped me maintain clarity. They supported whatever decision I made, but their questions helped me process my feelings without falling back into old patterns of guilt and obligation. Finally, I drafted a letter that established boundaries while offering limited assistance. I would pay for my father's medical expenses not because I owed my family anything, but because I could afford generosity from my position of strength. However, my financial help came with one non-negotiable condition. They had to attend family therapy sessions to address the toxic dynamics that had poisoned our relationships. "I am willing to help with Dad's medical costs," I wrote, but only if the entire family commits to at least 6 months of professional counseling. This isn't about punishment. It's about creating the possibility for healthy relationships moving forward. I also made it clear that I would return for one visit to see my father, but that my presence shouldn't be interpreted as willingness to resume my previous role as family problem solver and funding source. When I walked into the cardiac care unit 3 weeks later, my parents barely recognized me. The timid, anxious daughter they remembered had been replaced by a poised, confident woman, wearing a tailored suit and carrying herself with the assurance of someone who had built her own success. My father looked fragile in his hospital bed, hooked to monitors that beeped steadily, but his eyes were alert when I approached. For a moment, I saw genuine emotion flicker across his face, something I couldn't remember witnessing during my childhood. "Dora," he whispered, reaching for my hand. "You came. I came to see how you're doing and to discuss our family's future," I replied gently but firmly. The therapy sessions that followed were initially uncomfortable for everyone involved. Dr. Patricia Wells, our family counselor, had reviewed the recordings and letter I had shared, so she understood the dynamics that had driven me away. Madison and my parents spent the first 2 sessions trying to minimize their behavior and shift focus to my overreaction to normal family expectations. But Dr. Wells wasn't interested in enabling their denial. She made them listen to the recordings of their hospital conversation and explain their reasoning for prioritizing Precious's walk over my medical emergency. "When you chose the dog's schedule over your daughter's life, Doctor," Wells said directly to my parents, "what message did that send about her value in your family?" The confrontation was devastating and necessary. My mother broke down crying when forced to acknowledge that she had trained me to believe love was conditional on usefulness. Madison finally admitted that she had actively discouraged our parents from visiting me because she was jealous of any attention I might receive. "I thought if they went to see you, they would realize how much you did for us," Madison confessed during our 4th session. "I was scared they would start appreciating you more than me." My father's admission was perhaps the most painful. We took advantage of Dora's love for us. We knew she would always be there, always willing to help, so we never thought about what we were giving her in return. The sessions continued for 8 months, long past my original 6-month requirement. Slowly, carefully, we began building something resembling functional family relationships. My parents learned to ask about my life, my business, and my marriage without immediately segueing into requests for assistance. Madison started working consistently and began paying her own expenses for the first time in her adult life. Most importantly, they began acknowledging my achievements and expressing pride in my success. When Mountain View Creative was featured in a national business magazine, my parents sent flowers and a congratulations card that focused entirely on my accomplishment without mentioning how it might benefit the family. Madison's transformation was particularly dramatic. Working retail had given her perspective on financial responsibility, and therapy had helped her understand how her entitlement had damaged our relationship. She apologized, not just for her behavior during my medical emergency, but for years of taking my sacrifices for granted. "I never realized how much you gave up for us," she said during one of our later sessions. "I thought you just naturally wanted to take care of everyone. But now I understand you were giving up your own dreams to fund mine." The healing process wasn't quick or perfect, but it was genuine. We established new boundaries that allowed for loving relationships without financial exploitation or emotional manipulation. I maintained my life in Portland while developing the ability to enjoy limited time with my family without sacrificing my own well-being. On the 2-year anniversary of my letter, we gathered for a family dinner where I was treated as an honored guest rather than a convenient resource. Madison had saved money to cook an elaborate meal. My parents asked thoughtful questions about my business and marriage, and for the first time in my memory, I felt genuinely valued for who I was rather than what I could provide. The most profound lesson from my journey wasn't about cutting toxic people from your life, though sometimes that's necessary. It was about the power of setting boundaries that force people to confront their behavior and choose whether they want healthy relationships badly enough to change. By refusing to enable my family's dysfunction, I had created space for them to grow into people capable of genuine love and respect. As I sat around that dinner table, watching my family practice new patterns of interaction they had learned in therapy, I realized that sometimes the greatest gift you can give people is the consequence of their actions. My disappearance had forced them to examine their treatment of me and choose whether they wanted to be different. The daughter who had once sacrificed everything for scraps of conditional love had become a woman who understood that real love doesn't require payment plans or self-destruction. I had learned to value myself enough to demand respect, and in doing so, I had created the possibility for my family to become people worthy of the love they had always taken for granted. My story doesn't end with perfect family relationships because that's not realistic, but it ends with something more valuable. The knowledge that I have the power to choose relationships that honor my worth and the courage to walk away from those that don't. The life I built in Portland proved that it's never too late to write a better story for yourself, one where you're the hero rather than the convenient supporting character in someone else's drama. The mountains outside my window still remind me every morning that I chose to climb out of the valley of toxic family dynamics and build something beautiful on higher ground. And the woman looking back from my reflection finally knows she deserves every bit of happiness she has claimed for herself. What would you do if your own family prioritized a pet over your life? Have you ever had to set boundaries with people you love to protect your own well-being? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in difficult family situations. Don't forget to share this with someone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by what they can provide for others. Thank you for joining me on this journey of discovery, and I wish you the courage to build relationships that celebrate your true value.